Okay, welcome to another episode in our series on Genesis 1 to 11. That's what we're studying right now. So we're going to talk about Noah and the flood and what happens afterwards. So Genesis 6 to 11. What is going on there? We will find out by looking at all the text. So bear with me, and here we go. Okay, this is the text of chapter 6. We already looked at some of this. Especially important is verse 8, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Why is that? Because Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations. Little comment here. He was a just man, that is, he performed according to the standard of righteousness. And perfect, but perfect only in his generations. Ish tzadik tamin haya bedorotav. So he was only tamim, that is to say, perfect or upstanding, upright, in so far as he was an exception in his generation. So that means he wasn't completely perfect. We have heard about the three sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japhet. The Japhetites, the Hamites, and the Shemites come from them, according to the divine author. Then we have the announcement of the total destruction of the world. So God is going to change his creation. He's going to turn it upside down. He's going to destroy his creation and make a new beginning. And that's why the whole section about Noah is like a second version of the story of creation. Now we have in the story of creation, first Genesis 1, what does the world look like? How did it come about? Creation of man and then sin. And the same order of things we find here. So we have the creation of everything, that is to say the creation of the ark, somehow is similar to the creation of the world in Genesis 1. And then, of course, we have the flood. So the Spirit of God that was brooding over the waters has now been retracted, has withdrawn. So the flood now comes to destroy the world of the first creation, leaving alone and not destroying the ark, which is in a way the new creation that God will use to deliver mankind. So we have the notion of a covenant here, the covenant with Noah, which is interesting. With thee I will establish my covenant. So now there is a covenant, and there are several characteristics of that covenant that we will look at in Genesis 9. So the obedience of Noah leads to the creation of the ark, and in the ark Noah and every other person of his family, his sons and his daughters and his sons-in-law are there. His sons and his daughters-in-law are there, and they will survive the flood. Let's go to the next chapter and take a look at chapter 7. So what does that bring for us? Again, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. So also the righteousness of Noah is in comparison to his generation, is relative, it's not perfect. We have the distinction between the pure and the impure animals. The pure animals are there, 7 pairs of them, to indicate that they will be necessary for worship, for sacrifices later on. Much could be said about the story of the flood itself. I'm not going to do that. We're going straight to the next chapter, chapter 8. What do we find in chapter 8? So the earth became dry again because of the wind. We can make a suggestion here that this wind, of course, is also called the ruach. The word ruach meaning both spirit and wind. All the waters come back to their original position, and then finally the tops of the mountains become visible, and then they can leave the ark. As a matter of fact, that is a commandment: go forth of the ark, thou and thy wife and thy son's wife with thee. So he goes out. There is a new beginning, and it starts in verse 20. And Noah built an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast and of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And now there is a decision from verse 21 that God will no longer deal with the world simply by applying his righteousness to the world, but he will deal now with mankind on the basis of grace. I will not again curse the ground anymore for man's sake, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. So it's impossible to change anything simply by repeating the judgment. Neither will I again smite anymore everything living as I have done. And so from now on, it's no longer pure righteousness that God will use to deal with man. Let's go to the next chapter, which is chapter 9. And we will see there a couple of things. Here you see, be fruitful and multiply, which is the same terminology that was used by God to speak to Adam and Eve in the story of creation. But now there is a difference. Instead of living in harmony with the surrounding animals, it says here, the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth. So it's a mixture. It's a new creation, but it still has the consequences of the fall in that new creation. Into your hand are they delivered. So mankind is again in the position of having to deal with the animals, take care of the animals, but the animals, on the other hand, now have fear for them. Just like the earth was cursed in Genesis 3, and then mankind became violent in Genesis 4. Now here the animals are alienated from man. The first new thing after that is, every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. So the green herb that was given in the original creation has now been added to by the eating of meat, with one exception: you shall not eat the blood that is in there. And there's a connection between the prohibition to eat the blood of an animal, so you have to kill the animal by bleeding it out, so there is hardly any blood left in the meat. There's a connection between that and the violence of one man to another. Surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it, and at the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. So this is the institution of the death penalty for murder. Verse 6, whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. And so it's an obligation within human societies to punish murder with death. And the reason for that is, for in the image of God made he man. And then again, we have the commandment to be fruitful and multiply. So there is a new order, a new covenant, a new creational order. This way, you can say up to here, verse 7, this is like an order for all mankind, even if they are not aware of it. This is what shall happen. Someone who kills will be killed. A nation that allows murder, allows killing, would itself be subject to murder and killing. Now, here in verse 9, all of this comes together in the covenant with mankind, the new covenant. I'll establish my covenant with you, with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you. I will establish my covenant with you, that there will no more be any flood or any total destruction of mankind because of the human unrighteousness. We have the rainbow as a sign for that. It's a covenant not just with mankind, but with all of the living nature. It's an everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth. That's a covenant of Noah, the Noahidic covenant, and it's quite important. It covers all nations everywhere. There is in later rabbinic literature the idea of the covenant of Noah, which is tantamount to a Torah, an instruction in law for all mankind, and it consists of 7 specific groups of commandments and prohibitions. I will talk about that in a separate video, but this is the source of that. There is an everlasting covenant between God and every other living creature. Now we have not just the creation, the second creation, but we also have a second fall. The second fall is a bit different. Noah began to be a husbandman and he planted a vineyard, so he can produce wine. He can produce something that is tasty and invigorating. It's a very interesting ability of man to be able to drink this fermented alcoholic beverage. However, what happens is an exaggeration. He goes beyond the limit and he was drunk and he was uncovered within his tent. Now remember that Adam and Eve tried to cover themselves with fig leaves, that God gave them something else to cover their shame, to cover their nakedness, which is the normal and, let's say, fitting response to the fact that mankind had become sinful and was aware of their own vulnerability, both moral and physical. Now, to become drunk is like Cain. Cain is so proud of the produce of his own labor that he brings that as a sacrifice, and he goes beyond the limit with that. Here, Noah is able to make wine. He's a producer of wine, and he goes beyond the limit by becoming drunk. That is his shame. That is his nakedness. Okay, that's one thing. That's the sin of Noah. But then we have here the sin of shaming someone else. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his 2 brethren without. So we have here 2 different commandments being broken. The idea that Ham looked upon his father in his disgrace, watched it, noted it, instead of trying to withdraw himself. He just went into the tent and saw his father. That's the first sin, so to speak. And to examine someone else's shame, someone else's vulnerability, that's the first thing that goes wrong. And then secondly is the first instance of Lashon Hara, which is the Hebrew expression for gossip. So he's gossiping by telling his 2 brethren about the shame of his father. Now, Shem and Japhet indeed make an attempt to cover the nakedness of their father. Their faces were backward and they saw not their father's nakedness. Okay, and now, interesting enough, Noah says, "Cursed be Canaan," but Canaan is one of the is of the offspring of Ham. He's certainly not the one who did it, but Canaan is then mentioned as the name for Ham. Ham is considered here as the father of an entire line of people that have the same characteristic, the same character, the same behavior as Ham. And that is why Canaan, which obviously is closer to the reader's time, and the reader knows about the conquest of the land of Canaan, making that into the land of Israel. He is aware of that. So he knows about this curse. Actually, the Canaanites became servant of servants. They were not completely destroyed when the Israelites conquered the Holy Land, but they were still here. And now we have this couple of statements. Blessed be the Lord God of Shem. Blessed be, therefore, God. Canaan shall be his servant. Now, what does it mean, his servant? There are two possibilities. Canaan shall be the servant of the Lord, or Canaan shall be the servant of Shem. I think we should understand it to be both in a sense. Canaan is not shall not be Shem's servant simply because God wanted one nation to be ruled by another nation. But Canaan shall be the servant of the Lord by serving Shem. Now, these are names that refer to a way of living. So the Hamites and the Shemites and the Japhetites are three different branches of humanity. Japhet is the continuation of this creative and intelligent progeny of Cain. Japhet are the Europeans that covered the largest part of the world. Europeans and Asians and North Americans and South Americans, all these together form the Japhetites. The Hamites, however, the Hamites are Africa and part of the Arab world. No, the Arab world is part of the Shemites also. Japhet and Shem, and the Hamites are maybe the Chinese, maybe some other Iranian, Turkish population. I'm not sure, but the Hamites have this specific position here. Now take a look here. God shall enlarge Japhet, that is to say that the territory where Japhet and the Japhetites are living shall be extremely large. So that's why I mentioned Asia, Europe, North America, South America. But he shall dwell in the tents of Shem. And again, we have this ambiguity. Is it God that shall dwell in the tents of Shem? Or is it Japhet that shall dwell in the tents of Shem? The German theologian von Rath said, well, we are all Japhetites living in the tents of Shem. That is to say that the Greeks and the later Europeans, the Asians, whatever origin we have, we learned from the Semitic religions. We learned from the Israelite religion. We learned from the maybe even the Arabic religion, but we learned from the Semites. They are the nations that are closest to the divine revelation. Canaan shall be his servant, and again, the servant of God by serving Shem. So this is the idea. That is how the three main branches of humanity are related to one another. So Japhet will conquer the whole world, but he will learn morality from Shem, and Canaan will provide the material conditions for which that are necessary for Japhet to dwell in the tent of Shem. That's a service to God, just like Shem serves God, and that is how Japhet also serves God. That's the relationship. There is asymmetry here. Not all people are created equal. They are equal in the eyes of the Lord, but they have different functions. That is not to say that if you're a European that you are a Japhetite in this sense, and if you're born in Morocco you have to be a Canaanite or a Shemite. It's just like in the case of Cain and Abel, agriculture and farming, keeping flocks. There are two possibilities within human nature. Here, three possibilities in the building of human societies. Japhet will indeed conquer the world. Europe will go out everywhere, make colonies, um, investigate the earth. They are researchers and explorers. The Shemites indeed are more withdrawn into themselves. They live in their tents and they ponder the mystery of God's revelation. And Canaanites are the nations that, in a way, provide the material basis of everything. They can be found in Europe. And they are, in that sense, Canaanites in Europe and in Asia, etc. So you shouldn't see this as a differentiation between geographical spaces, but you should see it as a division of function. We need the culture and the science of Japhet. We need the morality and the understanding of God's revelation of the Shemites, and we need the people who build our material world and make it possible to have a tent and to have this exploration from the Japhetites. Okay, so that is the specific covenant that you find in Genesis 9. Let's go to the next chapter. Let's go to Genesis 10, and then you see what ultimately happened. The generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japhet. The story of God will continue through the Semites. That's obvious. We have here a nice genealogy. What is the sons of Ham? And you see here that from Ham comes, for instance, Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. Every reader of the text will know that Babel is the place of the exile. The land of Shinar is the place where the nations will move to. It's to the east. We have Ashur already mentioned here. The second exile, the first exile is by the power of Ashur, and the second exile is by the power of Babel, the exile of Judah and Benjamin. So we have some indications here of the future. Let's go to the end. These are the families of the sons of Noah after the generations in their nations, and by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. So that this division of the nations corresponding to these large typical elements of the three sons of Noah, that is what is presented to us in chapter 10. And then finally, in this whole section, until we get to chapter 12, the story of Abraham, we have something about language. The whole earth was of one language and of one speech. So one language, that is to say, there was one set of grammatical rules, and one speech, there was a whole vocabulary, and everyone had that in common. So we have this tendency to go east. They found the plain in the land of Shinar. They dwelt there, and now something happens. This is the first indication of a kind of society that is built. It's not built like Canaan does. Canaan builds a city. That's the first city that we hear mentioned. The city in the Bible has a specific position. The city is the place of refuge, the place where you distance yourself from the earth that is cursed because of the blood of Abel. It's a place of anonymity, but also a place of safety. It's a place of freedom, and yet also a place of oppression. And you see that here, that every city is related to some kind of religious goal. Verse 4, go to, come on, Hava, it says here. Let us build us a city. Let us build a city for us. So they don't say let us build a city for other people. No, just for us. It's this taking care of your own in the first place that is so dominant here. Let us build us a city. In the German translation, they leave that out. They haven't seen the importance of that statement. Lasst uns eine Stadt und einen Turm bauen. Eh? Let us build us a city. And nivne lanu hier. Lanu meaning for us. That's very important. And a tower. Tower comes from the verb gadal, meaning to be great. So migdal is already something that is great, but also something by which you magnify, you enlarge yourself. Whose top may reach unto heaven. So it has a connection to the heavens. It bridges the distance between earth and humanity and the divine realm. And let us make us a name. Important also. We find that Enosh started to call out the name of the Lord. That is the little description of the beginning of religion. To build an altar and call out the name of the Lord, that is basically what religion is. But now it says, let us make us a name. So now Selanu, we have again this expression for us. Let us make a name. No, it doesn't say let us worship the name or let us call out the name of the Lord. No, we want to build our own name, which implies that this name that they build for themselves has religious meaning, is about what you worship and what you give honor to. All in the name of unity and solidity, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And that is exactly what was said of Noah. You have to fill the earth, so you have to multiply and fill the earth. They don't want to fill the earth. They see that as being scattered. Pen nafuts alpene kola means that we are not spread out. But to be spread out is exactly what God wants humankind to do. That is to fill the earth. And not to be spread out means that they see this commandment of filling the earth as being spread out. They are thinly spread out. They are not in sufficient groups to have power, have dominion, because power comes from this unification of man in a city. They don't want to be scattered, and that is they need a name. If you're a Babylonian, you belong to Babel, you belong to the city, so you will be there. There you have all the rights in the world. There you are a citizen, and that will give you standing in the world, safety, provide safety, etc. So if you can make yourself a name, you will build a place where everyone will go to in order to become part of that city and that nation. So there is a response by the Lord when he sees that humanity does the opposite of what was commanded to Noah. The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man builded. And by the way, you will find in many places in Genesis this anthropomorphic language. God regrets something, he has sorrow, he is angry, he comes down here. That's just figurative speech, and so you shouldn't think that the Hebrew text actually ascribes to God, let's say, legs and movement in the world, and that is not the case. Verse 6, and the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. This is the beginning of a whole adventure of the life in the city, and what the city will be able to produce. And it again crosses the limit. This is not the humble living within the limits that God has given to humanity. It's an attempt to cross the limit, to be more than human, to be closer to being godlike. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Well, the imaginations of man, we've seen that in Genesis 6, they might be evil all day, every one of them. So if they can simply do whatever they imagine to do, because they form this solid group of people, because they have built for themselves a city, because they have built for themselves a name in the world, then evil is possible in the highest degree. Now, what is God's graceful response? He might have he could have brought in the flood again. There's reason enough to bring a second flood, but he doesn't do that. He has a covenant now with Noah and his offspring. He's going to do something else. That's a graceful measure that he is taking. He's simply confusing the languages. He's destroying this ability for communication. At first it is said they had one language and one speech, that is to say one grammar and one set of words, and now he confuses the nations into different language groups and with different grammars and different vocabularies. Yet, if you cannot understand one another, then you are not able to build a name for yourself. You're not able to build a city. So they left off to build the city. Of course, later on they would do it again, and Babel came into being. And the same with Ashur. But the original name was kept. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. So in his grace, he allows them to live, but he takes a measure by which humanity will indeed perform according to his commandment, which is to fill the whole earth. And then we get the generations of Shem, and I will leave just with this indication that one of the Semites, one of the offspring of Shem, is Terach, and Terach begat Abraham, Nachor, and Haran. Lot is the son of Haran. Haran died before his father Terach. Abram took Sarai for his wife, and then Terach dies in Haran. That's the end of Genesis 11. That's the end of this prehistory that we have in Genesis. And then in Genesis 12, a whole new section begins, and it's one of the most important sections in the Bible. It's the story of Abram. We already heard about the birth of Abram, and now we get the Toledot, Terach. What comes out of Terach? Well, mainly Abraham and Lot, but above all Abram. And now we start the story of the patriarchs. Okay, so this is a very brief introduction to Genesis 6 to 11. Of course, I've left out many things, but I can't, of course, explain everything, but I hope you get the gist of the whole instruction. A couple of things important here. Important is the idea that God will no longer apply retributive justice to the earth. He will no longer bring a flood upon the earth. So he will deal with mankind on the basis of grace. Secondly, that this is like a second attempt of creation, with creation being mirrored in the building of the ark, with the fall being mirrored in the drunkenness of Noah. And then we have this division of human beings in three lines, Japhet, Shem, and Shem, whereas in the first creation story we had it along two lines, the line of Seth and the line of Cain. What is important also, that now there is the lifting of the prohibition of eating meat. Meat is now allowed. The exception is you cannot eat blood. Why not? Because if you eat meat with blood in it, you will get used to the sight of blood. So it might lead to murder, murder becoming less of a huge thing. You will have no impediment for murder if you're very used to looking at blood. At least that is the logic of the author. But you might also say, look, blood is now has now become the symbol of life. So you shouldn't eat an animal that still has this symbol of life in it. Blood has a very different function now. Blood is set aside, blood is sanctified for a different function. And that is to be a symbol of life. That is why a bloody sacrifice will atone for me, because the blood sort of represents my life. That blood of the animal represents my life. What else? Well, that of course these three different lines, these three different types of humanity have as their goal to be connected together in this manner. Japhet, that is the European culture, will live under the guidance of the Shemites, live in the tents of Shem. There they will learn about the morality that God has given to man. And Canaan is that section of humanity that provides the material conditions for all of that. So Japhet, Shem, and Canaan, the three major functions of human culture, which can be found anywhere. There's not a real geographical separation between the three, but there are three major functions within humanity. And last but not least, the idea that a city is, just like it was in the case of Cain, who built a city. The city is like the attempt to get away as much as you can from the soil that is cursed, and cursed because of the blood of Abel, to find sanctuary, to find safety. But it's also a place where oppression and violence have become institutionalized. And the divine response to that is to disrupt communications, because everything is dependent on having one single language. Okay, well, that's it for me for this time. Hope you enjoy your studies, and hope to see you soon.
Dank voor het luisteren naar Beit Ahavat Torah. Graag tot ziens.